please give a warm welcome to production designer Craig Lathrop. Oh my goodness, some people... Craig, thank you. Thank you for being here. I'm actually right off the bat, pun intended, I got to ask you about the opening sequence. I was blown away how it unfolds. It's a crazy looking bedroom, and then all of a sudden things seem to part out of the way to do a 180-degree take on her face and the silhouette.
And be able to see her whole
and that's not CGI.
No.
It's all the fact that you were able to accomplish that. Walk us through that.
Well, I mean, Jaron Blanchke, he did some storyboards, and I just figured out how to make it work, which was basically the set just peels apart as the camera is moving.
But you make it sound super easy. The set peels apart.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was a couple of sets that did this. So this particular set, there was a bed alcove. I know it's very dark in that scene, so you don't see all the drapery and everything, but there's a little bed alcove from the period. And as she comes out, as she starts to walk towards the window, as soon as you get to 90 degrees, those two walls start to open. And then the camera swings around so that we can get enough distance away. And it was a very odd-shaped room. It was a room that was like all the sets, if you went into them, they looked perfectly real, like what you would expect. Things moved out of the way, things could wild. This is the one set that if you went and saw this set, it makes sense in the camera more than it did to the eye. So that's what it was completely designed for, the camera move.
Which leads me to the next question, the fact that Robert Eggers, who you've worked for 5 films now, he loves long takes.
He does.
And then because of that...
Which means there's a lot of sets that move out of the way.
Can you walk us through that? What does that entail? So like any scene you have...
So there's a few of them. I mean, in this particular film, the 3 big scenes that you may notice that we had to move the set around were that scene. There's the scene where they come up the staircase, right? In the castle. So that we took out part of the stage and built it down into the basement so that we could do that camera move. I had to reverse the way that stairs normally go in a castle. It's a whole nother thing, just so that we could get the right angle. And that was mainly about being able to get the angle right so that we could do that push through and seemingly one long shot. There is a stitch if you look for it. But that was that scene. And then there's the scene at the Hutter's house on the couch.
Yeah.
Where the camera, I know y'all just watched this. Anyway, the camera comes up and over her. She's got her head back so that because the camera's upside down, she's in the right direction, but the world is upside down. That was what we're trying to do. The sofa's against the wall. So as the camera is coming over, as soon as it gets high enough that you're not seeing the back wall anymore, that separates and opens up so that the camera we can get this.
But you make it sound like it's super easy. I'm like I'm having things opening, but like when from your vantage point, you're designing this world, and then on top of that, you have to have walls open up and close, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, well, as you said, I've done several of Rob's films, so we're getting used to it.
But allow me to like pick your brain a little bit. Inside, when he's telling you, okay, we're gonna do this, whatever, and you probably just say, yes, we'll do it. But internally you're going, what the F? I'm gonna have to have all these walls open. And
you know what, I actually really like this. I started off in theater, moving sets is fun. And so it's actually a challenge. It's interesting because he doesn't usually, they don't always know how they're going to get the camera to do what they need it to do. They just know what the camera wants. Like they have an idea what the shot should be. And so it's a challenge for me to be able to say, well, we could do that. This is how we have to do that. And this is what I will need from you and what I can offer to you. So yeah, the what the F moment, it was just when I read the whole script and just the scale of it.
So this town is fictional. It's called Wisborg, but it's actually based on your research and actually, cities by the Baltic Sea.
Yeah, Hanseatic towns.
Walk us through. I was blown away by the fact that pre-plague aspect of the film, we watch this town that it doesn't look brand new. I saw sagging parts to the buildings, when the kids are running through the town, and then you have to show us afterwards the town is boarded up and it's a completely different look. Walk us through designing this whole.
Well, that was the challenge, right? So you wanted to start off with a bustling town, and I would never have wanted it to be all brand new anyway. It should be very lived in. We start off in the old part of town where it's medieval, and you're right, there's buildings that are sagging. But all of those buildings, one of the challenges from my side was just, I didn't want anything to be square or plumb, and so we had to very specifically design it so that buildings bowed and they tilt. And I know that it's not that you would necessarily see it when you see the film, but what you see is that, or I should say what you don't see is something that seems crisp and new, and so if you look carefully, you'll see it. And you noticed it. You noticed the sags. You noticed that we're on the back lot that was very flat, and I built everything.
You built 60 sets.
We built 60 sets. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like nonchalant. I built 60 sets. Okay,
Yeah.
so you made them all look old and sagging, but then
that's just the exterior. So the exteriors, we had several sets for the exteriors, but the exterior streets, that's what we were doing.
And after, during the plague, they were
So
boarded.
the whole idea was what sort of streets could I build that are the same streets, that you see in the same streets, that when you first see it, they are bustling and seem like they're alive, and you'll see a lot more of the decorations are out, and a lot more awnings are out. Plus, of course, we have all the people in the hustle and bustle. And then when we board it up, how do we do that? So one of the good things for me was that these Hanseatic towns, they're mainly brick Gothic, so I leaned into that so I could build everything out of brick. Each building had to have its own personality, and I hope you saw some of those details. But I wanted to have that limited palette because I thought it was easier for me to then board it up and add some snow and have it be bleak. And yet, at the beginning, we could add a little bit more color just in some of the set dressing.
And all of this was done in Prague?
All of this was done in Prague.
So the sets that we watch, it's all, like the whole town, it's all built up.
All of it's built. All of it's built. In fact, there's only a couple of, there's the nature scenes where he's riding this horse or he's standing out on the edge of, those are locations. The only other locations are the two courtyards that we see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the approach to the Orlock's castle is Corvin Castle in Romania.
One of the other aspects, I was blown away by your design, but one of the aspects that I was quite taken is that we watched the class differences in the design. So we watch Emma's and Thomas' home that is like more humble, and walk us through the idea of seeing the class differences and the characters in their home environment.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, I'm trying to express the characters. That's the goal. So the Hutter's house is in the old town. It's a medieval house. It's a half-timbered building with brick infill. But then on top of that, if you'll notice, I wanted to show that Hutter aspires to be like his friend.
Correct.
So you see these Biedermeier furniture that's sort of awkwardly sitting in this space. And you can see how he's painted it to try to make it look like it's something nicer than it is, much like some of the apartments I've had. Yeah, so that was that. And then when you get to the Harding house, I could really lean into the whole sort of Biedermeier experience and try to show what that life is like and what those characters, how they lived.
But Emma, at the beginning, the opening sequence, she lives in a fancier environment.
Yeah, that's the Harding's house.
And then she goes to, when she's with Thomas, is a far more humble environment.
Yeah, so it actually starts off in that humble environment, and then he takes her to the Harding house, this friend, and that's the nice house. And we spend a lot of the film in that house. Mm-hmm. That was 3 different sets, basically, very large sets. Mm-hmm. And then they go back to their old house. Mm-hmm. So,
and what I notice in your design, everywhere we go, there's so much detail. Like they open drawers, and there's
a lot more than you saw too. Yeah, I had some really great people helping me out. So,
but walk us through the importance that, like, everywhere we look, there's actually palpable, real things, and the importance of having that.
Well, it's interesting because even though that Rob and Jaron, they don't really like to linger on and fetishize bits in the set, much to my chagrin. But I still think it's important, and you never know where they're going to look. So that's part of it. Is that. The other part of it is just the actors, and when they come in, that it feels like a real place. It's not that much extra work you've done the research, you know what it should be, just to go ahead and make sure that it's there. And like I said, you never know exactly where the camera's going to look. And 100% of the time, that corner that you didn't think needed to have everything, that's where they'll be looking if you don't finish it properly.
When I introduced the film, I talked about moonlight, and like a lot of the film takes place in moonlight. And from your vantage point, is so hard because colors, you have to, like the houses, you need to make them brighter. So in the moonlight, we're able to see the colors. Can you tell us of the challenges of shooting this film that recalls moonlight?
You know, one of the great things about working with the same group of people over and over again is you develop a rapport. And with Jaron and his moonlight, I mean, we first started. Jaron Blaschke, the
director of photography.
Yes. So with Jaron, we started down this road on the lighthouse, where he came up with a very specific filter. He got this filter from a medical company that had a very specific clip. And for us, even though that film was in black and white, I had to figure that out because, I hope I'm not getting too technical. Excuse me if I am.
Please, indulge us. Go for it.
But so what we wanted on that one, and then it translates into The Northman and this film, what we wanted on that one was people to look like leathery and like an old style of photography that used to be. So when you do black and white photography, you often use a red filter to make your skin look beautiful and smooth. And he wanted to use this blue filter, very specific blue filter, to make all your blemishes come out. So what that meant for me and it took a little bit of adjustment to try to figure it out, was what that would be in black and white. And I can tell you the first thing is if you just had a regular oak floor, it would look like charcoal because all the reds are shifting to black and all the blues are shifting to white as opposed to the other way around, if that makes sense.
No, of course. Yeah.
So what does that have to do with Nosferatu? Well, we kept going with that and how he could try to find that night look when we were on the Northman and what it would do and what colors, how the colors would shift. And now we're not in black and white, but you still see the red shifting to darker and the you know which colors are how they're going to change. So I had a whole nother film on that. So then when we got to this one, I knew he was doing the same thing. I knew that we were going to do he wanted to get a color that almost looked black and white for the night scenes.
So that meant that like the houses needed to.
Well, you wanted to emphasize. Certainly, I wanted to emphasize some of the color. Well, first off, the Biedermeier period is absolutely crazy. I mean, you think of those beautiful, clean line furniture, but when you get to the wallpaper, you know, as we're making all this wallpaper and fabrics and all of those things, they were loud. But I toned them down a little bit, but I tried to still get the flavor of it, so you still had the feeling of it. I didn't move away from things that weren't true, but I just chose the ones that were a little bit more subtle, if you can believe it, because it's pretty loud. And then I knew, just from my experience with Rob and Jaron, I knew sort of where those were going to go when they shifted to the night scenes and make sure that I didn't have colors that were going to start melding into each other. You still wanted some separation and interest.
I noticed that you evade the color red.
Yes.
Until we go to Orlock's castle.
Yes.
In the bedroom with Thomas, you have red. Can you walk us through that logic?
Honestly, there's a logic to it. I mean, he didn't want the blood color to be everywhere. So it's interesting that you picked that up. But so you'll notice my brick isn't exactly red brick. I had a lot of brick that I didn't really want it to be anyway. And so we wanted to avoid the color of red and the association with blood, so that when we had the scenes with blood, it would stick out more, and plus it's associated with Orlock. So I used the color red where it associates with Orlock.
But
That's
you
as
don't,
simple as
when we
that.
get to the castle, we don't see red. It's only in Thomas's bedroom that we see the.
Well, that's where Orlock's going to do some of his nastiest bits.
Okay. Walk us through the Orlock's castle. It's just fascinating, the fact that it's just this decaying building. You built it from scratch, correct?
Yeah.
The exterior is also built out, or?
The exterior, the first bit of exterior that you see in the film when they're coming towards the castle, that's the Corvin Castle, and visual effects did a lot to help me take it down, because the problem with Corvin Castle is, honestly, 30 years ago, the pictures I have from Corvin Castle was perfect. It was beautiful. It was decaying and it was falling apart, and they've done a really good job of renovating. And so now it's all beautiful and whitewashed and ready for tourists to come through. So we needed to bring it down. And that was true for, I swear to you, I think I saw every castle in the Czech Republic. So, I mean, there were other reasons for us to build the castle, but the one that was, you know, there was no negotiation on, is I needed it to represent Orlock. It needed to be decaying, almost diseased. You know, it needed to feel like it was, it's not, you know, it's unkempt, for sure.
Can you talk about the animatronics in the fireplace?
Oh, in the fireplace, yeah. Some people don't notice it.
Well, I have eagle eye.
You're very good.
Thank you.
It was, I don't mean to downplay it. It wasn't, so the hardest part, of course, was I'll let you in on a couple of things for that one. So we made these statues, and we knew that I knew that they had to move. So the statues were designed so that the head could move, and we had guys behind the set with wires to make the head move, right? So that was none of that was CG. That was all in camera. The thing that so I designed these, and so instead of printing them, the construction coordinator talked me into carving them out of styrofoam and then putting a thick layer of concrete and finishing them off that way. So that's what we did, which was a mistake.
In what way? Okay,
Well,
good.
because Jaron needed a lot more light than we anticipated, and that fire was huge. And 2 days into filming in that set, and I had to redo them. I had to redo some of it because it was the styrofoam inside was melting, and so.
Wow. You bring up the firelight, but also in the rest of the film, it's all candlelight at
Candle
night.
and lamps, yeah.
A candle and lights. Walk us through from your vantage point.
Well, candles are really easy. It's the lamps that are tough. I was very lucky. My decorator found this gentleman in Germany. I want to say he was from Berlin, but I could be wrong on that. Who has this fantastic collection. I'm sorry I can't remember his name, but he has a museum quality collection of lamps from the period, hundreds of them. And we were able to rent some of them from him, borrow some of them from him, and then where we needed to electrify, some of them we needed to electrify, he loaned them to us so that we could recreate them. And even some of the ones that we were going to just keep as oil lamps, we had to recreate, so we had multiples. But it was great to have an actual lamp, and anybody here that's from the art department will know that's, finding good lamps is tough.
But when you came to designing the fact that we're going to have low lighting, candlelight, firelight, how does that impact your design and the colors and?
Well, once again, that when so you've got three different looks. You've got daytime, you've got firelight, which everything's going to shift warm. Then you've got night without the candles, either coming through the windows or so. You just have to think about those. I'm not quite sure how to tell you how that's done, except that you do it, and that's always in your mind. You're always thinking about, even if you were doing a contemporary film, you're still thinking about how, it's a two-dimensional image that you're trying to represent a three-dimensional space in. So, where do you want the little spots of light in the depth so that your eye gets pulled back, and it's just composition. So you're just trying to figure out how that works.
I know the answer to this question, we're going to ask anyway. The importance of the fact that you guys could have gone and found sets and shot in it, but the specificity of Robert and your world that you built from scratch, 60 sets, what was, can you tell us?
Well, I was trying to get the specifics that you're talking about. I talked about how the castles all looked new and all of that. I mean, if you go to Lübeck or Stad or any of the other sort of Baltic cities that are the Hanseatic cities, most of them have been destroyed a couple of times since the 1830s because of war, and then rebuilt, and then the little bits that they have that the historic part of town, once again, they're sort of spit shined, and they're they're beautiful, but they're not what we needed. So we found lots of individual buildings that I would have loved to have shot in front of, but you couldn't find a streetscape. Plus, Jaron and Robert have very specific shots that they have in mind. So, on top of the aesthetic, I could also, if I build it, I could accommodate those shots.
But we're dealing with supernatural, and like the average person.
No,
would,
we still wanted it. I mean, the whole idea was that if we can ground it into a real world, then the supernatural is more frightening. So if we can give you a sense of 1838 Germany and Romania, and it felt real, and like the whole world was right and was real, that the supernatural would be more frightening. So
No, absolutely.
That was the.
But I mean, I was blown away the fact that like the Orlock and Linda's not here to talk about this, but maybe you can chime in the fact that when Orlock shows up, he's wearing clothes from 300 years ago,
Well,
from
that's
the
the whole-
1500s, and
Yeah.
it's like you guys knew that. The average person that's watching the film doesn't know that he's wearing.
No, but I think even the average person, when they see it, they're like, they can see that there's a difference in the time period. It's not just, is he a nobleman, but you can sense that there's something else that's different about him. I hope, at least. Although I will say, we didn't see enough of his shoes. She had these fabulous shoes.
the super high heel.
Yeah, they were like,
boots.
they were these.
Where did that come about? It's like, and then the gait that he has, I was like the
Was
whole time
good.
going like, it must come from this weird fucked up shoes.
Yeah, I mean, they were sort of like mules, and they used to have these iron soles. These, like 3-inch heels that were iron soles, almost like a horseshoe when you looked on the bottom of them. So you get that clank, clank. And then she cheated a little bit. You would have had like a leather, I don't know what to call it. I'm not the costume designer, but basically I would say it's a leather sock that you slip into this thing. But she attached it, so it was easier for him to walk in.
Is there one particular thing that you designed in the film that you're super proud of?
Which is my favorite child?
Yes, in this scene, in this movie, I mean, you've done some.
There's a lot. You know what? There's a lot. I mean, and I have had this question asked to me before, and I keep changing my answer. You know, often
So
I'll say
what's
it's the
tonight?
streets. I think tonight, we'll go with the monastery. There we go.
And why was it about the monastery?
Because when I talked Rob into using there are these monasteries in Romania that are on the border of. Anyway, it doesn't matter where they are. There's these monasteries in Romania that are absolutely beautiful, and they're covered in frescoes both inside and out. And so we looked at different kinds of churches that would be appropriate. And some of them were wood, and some of them they're beautiful, but they didn't feel as transportive. And when I saw these churches, these monasteries, not churches, I was awestruck. I thought they were, you know, in the right way of saying the real word awesome. And it just felt to me that when Thomas comes in, that's what I wanted the audience to feel like. I wanted them to have that feeling too. I don't know if it worked, but hopefully. And so, and when I suggested it, I knew I didn't have the money to paint all of that, and plus I didn't know, you know, I didn't have the money or the time to paint it. And also I'm not sure if we had even with money and time, asking very talented scenic artists if they could paint me a 15th century masterpiece is still a lot. So it was a challenge in trying to figure out how I was going to do that. Luckily, I found a company in Italy that I know some designers have used them before, but I hadn't. They make this product that's it's almost like the glue on the back of a perfect bound book, but it's in sheets. It's very, very thin, so that when you put it on the wall, not only is it flexible and can it move across uneven walls, but the texture of the plaster comes through the material, the medium. And so it creates a beautiful cheat for the fresco. So a lot of the murals were, a lot of the frescoes, I should say, were things that we were able to find, and then the ceiling was bespoke. That was you didn't get the whole sweep of the story, but there's actually a story there. If you could have seen it, the devil and there's demons pulling people off ladders. You've seen this imagery a lot. I stole it from several sources, but so that was all created, all those angels. And then I just put some imitation gold leaf on the halo so that it would pop, because I knew it was going to be under firelight. So that's it. So that's the reason why. So today it's that.
So you can ask me what's my favorite.
What's your favorite?
The village when he comes in.
Oh, the Romanian.
The Romanian village.
Yeah,
the specificity of that village. It's phenomenal. How did that come about?
Well, I did find some research for it, but then when I was in Romania, they thankfully let me go to, there was two in particular, and I can't remember their names, outdoor museums, where they've gathered old buildings and plopped them back down in a space for you to go and walk through them. So that's where I was. And so I went to two of those, photographing everything so that I could nick all the carving and get it right. Because between The Witch and The Northman, I've done thatched roofs before. I mean, but I wanted to make sure it was these houses.
The specificity of that scene, the detail in that village, it adds to how scary that scene is.
Yeah, and then the Roma camp was fun too. That was also interesting. Only research I found was paintings from the era. There was some paintings of the era of Roma camps, and so you could figure out how their tents worked and what what they were using.
One last question. You're amazing. I love having you here. You mentioned the Witch. You've done 5 films with him. When I think about The Witch, it was one cabin and the woods. The budget, non-existent.
No, that was a $3 million film.
And you pulled magic. How does it feel from that start with Robert, The Witch, one cabin and the woods, and now 60 sets?
There's a lot that are similar. There's a lot of things that are similar.
In what way?
Well, so for instance, on The Witch, I wanted hand-rived cladding, which is they split the wood. You rive the wood. It's a way of splitting it, and you can make the clapboards. Production really didn't want me to do that. They didn't want the expense. I was able to find a way to do it in budget, but it was still difficult. And what I always had was I always had Robert behind me saying, yes, this is what we should do. So it was very easy for me to convince other people that if we can afford it, difficult shouldn't be a problem. It should be, we're going to do what we can do to make it right. And so that was true for The Lighthouse. It's true for this film, all the way through. So I always had somebody that has my back, which is a really lovely feeling.
Yeah, but at the same time, you have Robert Eggers' back because you're...
For sure.
Yeah.
It's great. With Rob, not only is he just a great person in general, but I feel blessed that there's a group of us that have worked together now over and over again and push each other. And that's a great feeling because you're going to be challenged, but it's almost like you're being challenged by a family member. Dysfunctional family, but family member.
Yeah, well, you're a delight. You got to come back and
I would love to come
your
back.
projects. Yeah, and your work in this film is absolutely phenomenal.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.